Hello again, this is Mike, and I am back for the grand finale of the Frankenstein series. If you've been listening, I've kind of been hinting at this one for a while, and we're going to end on a real high note, I think. I've sort of been debating the order of how to do these Frankenstein films, and I think I've always sort of realized that this one would have to be the last because it arguably is the best horror film of all time, Bride of Frankenstein. And it's such an iconic classic, it's so beloved, and it's so often discussed that I probably can't add a whole lot of new information, but I'll give you my personal take on it. I enjoy the film a great deal, and I hope you guys will too. We're going to start the film in 3, 2, and 1. And here we are, this picture approved by the production board, which is kind of a ironic way to actually begin the film, because this movie was so controversial on its initial release, and they just had such trouble getting it past the censors that that seal approval is kind of fun to see there. We just saw Karloff, who is billed number one, or with just his last name, which we sort of already discussed in the adaptation of The Raven, but that is such an honor for an actor that they're so famous that they have such a brand that that's all they really need to do is say Karloff and you think of horror. I mean, I can't think of a lot of other actors that you could do that with, like Bogart, Garbo. It's kind of fun seeing Karloff there. And of course, the monster's mate, who we all know is Elsa Lanchester, who does such a beautiful job here, is just marked as question mark, just as Karloff was in the original. Kind of keep the suspense going. We opened the film kind of a not a wraparound, but an introductory segment where we're introduced to Lord Byron and Percy and Mary Shelley, who are discussing the events of the previous film, sort of, I'd imagine, as a way to reintroduce audiences to the story, because it had been 4 years and, there wasn't the advantage of just looking back at things like, home video or whatnot. But it's kind of a fun wraparound. It definitely, I think, sets the tone for the picture. We have Gavin Gordon here as Lord Byron, and he gives a pretty good performance here. He's really fun and sort of hams it up here, introducing England's greatest writer, Lord Byron, and our most outstanding poet, Percy Shelley. It's just kind of like, a fun, loud costume drama performance, and that's one of the things you'll see in this film, is that a whale likes loud performances. He encourages them. This film, is definitely very campy, and I don't say that in a bad way. It has fun with the camp, and it's a compliment, really, when you're able to do camp well, where it doesn't feel false, where it feels genuine in its intent. And I think that's what Whale sort of liked in his horror films, aside from the original Frankenstein, which, There was some moments of camp in there. I know I sort of discussed them in the commentary for that film. We had Frederick Kerr, who was very, loud and funny as the grouchy old Baron. But in this film, it's populated with all the characters, I think, are pretty much like that. And this intro gives you a pretty decent feel for what's going to happen. Whale didn't want to do this film, and Universal had tried for a while to interest him in doing it, and I think they might have even considered probably doing it without him. There are a few treatments for a sequel to Frankenstein, some ideas. One of the most famous one I've heard is this idea of Frankenstein building this death ray. Sounds like a 50s mad scientist movie. And, eventually, in order to get Whale back, they had to offer him complete creative control, which was kind of, I probably don't think that's such a great idea. And they offered him the chance to do a project he really wanted to do, the musical Showboat, which I've probably heard led to, just the extravagance of that production and the money that they put behind there. It kind of led to the ouster of the Lemleys. But they recognized, I think, what a great talent James Whale was. And, what a distinct vision he had. And this film, you talk about what an auteur is and kind of, how directors put their own personalities in films. And I would say, if you look at this film, you sort of get a feel of the kind of guy James Whale was and the kind of art that he valued and what he wanted to do with art, what he wanted his art to say. And it's a brilliant film. Here we have the introduction of Una O'Connor, who is definitely one of the big pieces of comic relief, this shrill Irish woman who has that scream that's so piercing, it's, you can't decide if it's terribly annoying or terribly funny, and I imagine that Whale put her in the film because, he got a good laugh. And here we have E. Clive, who's the burgomaster, taking over from Lionel Belvoir from the last film. But he's pretty good. He's got that big mustache, and all he does is say, "Nothing to see here, monster indeed." Kind of a fun performance. The best laugh in here is where he tells Una O'Connor, he's like, "Oh, shut up." It's really funny. They are both in The Invisible Man. I think he plays the policeman in that film. Who, the Invisible Man, he walks around throwing ink on him and whatsoever. And then Una O'Connor is the wife of the hotel owner. And, the Invisible Man terrorizes him and she shrieks. I watched both of these films pretty recently for Halloween, and I was watching The Bride of Frankenstein with my dog. He was laying next to me on the couch, and her shrieking got to him, but he was whimpering. It's kind of funny. She was really into it. Here we have Hans, who is little Maria's father. And we see exactly what became of the monster down there, and the introduction of Karloff. And this, you might say that Bride of Frankenstein is campy and there's not a lot of moments of terror in it. But this introduction for Karloff is outstanding. Just the look on his face there, you see so much rage. And I think it's a really good characterization of the monster. You just see him, so angry after the events of the first film, and all the abuse he's had to endure has just filled him with rage. He's very sympathetic in this film. And there is a little moment in there where you sort of see how the humor is supplementing the horror, where the owl looks there, and as soon as Hans, his wife, pulls the monster from the debris, she starts screaming. All the monster just does is throw away real quick. This wasn't the first sort of pseudo horror comedy that Whale had done. His follow-up to the original Frankenstein was a picture called The Old Dark House, which it's pretty easy to get because it actually got into the public domain kind of in a fluke accident. But it stars Boris Karloff in the film, and Gloria Stewart, who's also in The Invisible Man, and it's got Charles Laughton, one of his first American roles. It's a pretty good film, but it's not very scary. I'd say it's even more comedic than this film is, but it's very much in the spirit of what Whale tries to do. It's got a lot of the same themes as this film, the anti-religious sort of commentary. In that film, Karloff doesn't speak. He plays this mute, mad butler who, the story is he has his tongue cut off. In fact, Karloff wouldn't get to speak in a horror film until The Mummy, which is such a shame that they didn't try it earlier, because he has such a distinctive voice. Here we're gonna see Colin Clive again. This takes place the same night as the end of the original Frankenstein. He's presumably brought home to die. And we see one of the few continuity errors between the two films. They say that the Burgomaster says that he needs to be brought home to his father. And his father is insane. Frederick Kerr, I believe, is dead by this point. And so we see Henry's brought here, and Colin Clive, you notice, or you will notice, that he doesn't stand up a great deal in this film. And unfortunately, he had suffered a broken leg before the film was about to be shot, and it's a leg, I guess, I've heard that he injured quite a few times. I actually got a really nice message from someone who enjoyed the commentary from the first Frankenstein film. She gave me a little bit of history about Colin Clive. And I guess he had injured, that was the fourth time he had injured that leg, and he had a terrible fear of it being amputated. And, who could blame him? Just the thought how medicine was at the time. It's not the same as it is now, and his acting career, not being able to sustain it if something had happened to him. And so he unfortunately turned to alcohol to self-medicate for depression. And, that's never a good solution. There's only 4 years separating Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and he looks about 10 years older than what he was in the original film. And it's really kind of sad. You see him wear that depression and alcoholism on his face. He looks sick in some of the scenes, I'd say. You see more sweat on his face, more wrinkles. But that isn't to say he isn't capable of delivering a great performance. He still has that mad intensity to the role. And I think in some ways the character's interesting in this film. They have to have a villain in this picture. And, Henry can't be the villain. He's, young and handsome, and so he doesn't want to continue with his experiments. He's learned something from the original film. But as we see with Elizabeth, talking about the dark specter of, this experiment shining over them, maybe he has to pay for what he's done. There's an interesting little bit earlier where Elizabeth said she was foretold there would be doom on her wedding night. And that's one of the things about this film that I think doesn't really quite hit home. Is that, it hits home, I guess. It's interesting in that this film, I think, tries the hardest to borrow themes from the original Mary Shelley novel, because in the original Frankenstein film there isn't a whole lot of similarities, but in this film we definitely see some more. The main plot of the film, and that the monster is demanding a mate, comes from a pretty significant act in the novel. And here we have Dr. Pretorius, who, we'll talk a great deal about. He is the star of the picture, in my humble opinion. He is the lifeblood of the film. But he, I've heard, is a nice comparison to the monster in the novel. They introduced Dr. Pretorius as a doctor of philosophy, and he talks about the morality of these life and death experiments, and that's kind of the role that the monster has in the original novel. Dr. Pretorius is a fascinating character. He's played by Ernest Thesiger, who was also in The Old Dark House. He plays the patriarch of the family, who spends he sits at the top of the table offering people a potato. Say they all like gin. It's really kind of fun. But this film, I think, above anything else, is probably, I'd say it's arguably the best performance in one of these Universal monster films. He's having so much fun with the role, and the role is played for all of its camp value. And the character is just so subversive and, blatantly subversive. The kind of things that he talks about. And it's not even everything that is said. It's kind of what's left unsaid, too. There's a lot of hints with Pretorius. I've heard that Whale put a lot of himself in Pretorius, and You can sort of see it, I would say. He's sort of a rebellious kind of character and very loud, very flamboyant, and, angry at the same time. Of course, James Whale was an openly gay man at this time, and, just sort of the natural conflict between, the religious, ultra Christian viewpoint versus living openly as a gay man. I think, Pretorius is a way to vent some of the frustrations and some of the anger and resentment of that conflict. Thesiger was not the first choice for the role. In fact, the only reason he's cast in the part is because Whale was offered full creative control of the project. This is the time of the Black Cat and the Raven, and one of the original choices that the studio was kind of hoping was Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains as well were considered for it, and I know how talented both of those men are. There's no shortage of me being on record saying I love Lugosi, and Claude Rains. He certainly showed that he was capable of doing horror comedy in The Invisible Man. We just missed the best part of the movie. If I could have just like 5 seconds of these Universal monster films survive, it'd be that toast to a new world of gods and monsters. Kind of sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? And, of course, it was the name of the sort of the Ian McKellen sort of biopic of James Whale's tragic last days. But I'm really glad that Thesiger is Pretorius. There wasn't anyone else who was, I don't think, capable of doing this. It's really one of the most fantastic performances in one of these films. Here we're seeing the introduction of his little experiments, the people that he grew in these petri dishes. And I believe this is the first time that this has ever been done. Having the illusion of tiny people, probably primitive green screen here, or what would become green screen. I really can't explain it. It was, these were created by John P. Fulton, who's kind of the special effects wizard of Universal. And he created all the special effects for the Invisible Man, the invisibility, which I watched that film recently, and those still really hold up. They're very impressive still. And also, Fulton was the one behind transformation of the not the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man. And those sequences were incredible too, and the thing about Fulton is that he learned from each film, and they improved over the sequels. The special effects as the Wolfman improved, and even in the Invisible Man sequels, they kind of looked a little more real as time went on. Very talented craftsman. I remember when I first saw The Bride of Frankenstein. It was one that I had a little trouble getting at first. You know, notice there's one of the little jars from behind. You notice it's a little baby. They cut it. You know, there's little hints of what they've cut, but you don't really see the whole picture. Yeah. From seed. One of the things that I was going to say is that I didn't really appreciate the humor of this film at first, and I really had to grow with it. Here's a very good instance there. You know, follow the lead of nature or God if you like your Bible stories. Be fruitful and multiply. And that is, you know, what we've discussed a little bit earlier, one of the huge themes of the film, and certainly one of the things worth talking about it is this kind of anti-biblical slant. You know, the monster is very much a Christ-like figure in here. They play up all the connotations of the fact that the monster is resurrected from the dead like Christ was. And, you know, I've actually heard that the film was released on Good Friday in 1935. I mean, how fun is that? But the film, you know, just looking at it and imagining, going off of what I was saying earlier about how, you know, this film plays for a 1935 audience and all the censors. If we remember, the original Frankenstein had a hell of a time getting past state censorship boards. The state of Kansas outright banned the film. And, you know, just imagine getting this past the censors. It must have been a whole hell of a lot harder. And there's some subtle tricks that I've read about. One of the biggest that we kind of just passed as Pretorius is proposing a little project to Henry is the line I said that I really liked, or God, if you like your Bible stories, was initially, or God, if you like your fairy tales, which, you know, imagine if that line had been there. And, you know, I think you could argue that when they developed the script, I think they were a little more blatant with everything. They were a little more subversive because they knew that some of the material that they wanted to do wouldn't make it past the censors. And so, you know, they were able to have the backup plan of the stuff they wanted, and they were more outrageous, so the stuff that actually got in the film seemed a little more tame by comparison, but in the long run it probably was still very out there. You know, the way Thesiger delivers that line is filled with sarcastic intent that, you know, the intent is still very much there. Another theme of the anti-religious sort of bent of the film is what we're going to see happen to the monster here. And it's angry and it's bitter, but it's also very funny too. Like, they really played up kind of how over the top the religious imagery can be in stories, I think. And, you know, just showing such an ugly figure like the monster kind of emulate Christ here as they strap him up. They put him on a sort of makeshift crucifix. You generate sympathy for the monster, but it also shows how goofy kind of they look when you see an ugly figure like the monster emulate Christ. And it's just over the top and sort of jarring. I think that's why it works and it's kind of funny. Karloff's got a brilliant look on his face when they hoist him up. He just kind of looks sort of dumbfounded by the whole thing. He doesn't know what to think. And, you can argue that the monster is like Christ in more than one way. It's not just the imagery, it's the fact that he suffers through the course of the film. The whole first act of it, before he comes to meet Pretorius, is the monster, basically getting tortured and shot and just being in pain and being rejected by people. And, he does a good job, Karloff. This film really is probably his best performance. Arguably that or the original Frankenstein, I would say. I think this film, if there wasn't a bias against horror pictures, that this film probably should be in the conversation for the best movie of all time. I would put it fairly high if you were to ask me to come up with an AFI list of the the worth of pictures. And this performance is incredible, and as we're going to see later on, the speech, the monster gets the ability to speak, and so it just adds whole new nuances to the character. Monster indeed. It's one of James Whale's clowns, E.E. Clive. Well, one of the things that I didn't bring up is how Jack Pierce plays with the makeup here. If you look at the original Frankenstein and then at this film, you see all of the scars that the monster got in the original picture. All the burn wounds are on his face in addition to all the scars from putting them together. And since, all his hair burned off in the original picture, you sort of see it singe. And one of the things that even further adds to it is the attention to detail here. The way that Karloff, you look at his face, you see that he heals over the course of the film, and that hair starts to go back. Here, I believe in this group of little girls is Marilyn Harris. She makes a cameo in the film. I guess her career as a child actor never really quite took off the way her parents might have hoped. I guess Whale brought her into the picture for a cameo and then gave her a line just so she would be paid a little extra and not have the distinction of only being an extra in the picture. See, this is just what I'm talking about, the film, being filled with these camp figures. You have the gypsy mother there smoking her pipe going, "Where's your pepper and salt?" It's kind of fun, just, even a minor character like this gets the chance to chew the scenery, and really, shows how much life Whale put into all of these scenes. One of the things, see, I like this film. I mean, I like the aspect of Karloff's performance, that he shows that he's trying to communicate there with his hands. The way he, holds them out longingly. It shows that the monster really does try to communicate. And, there's nobody that can understand him. Here we have probably one of the most famous moments of the film. We have O.P. Heggie as the blind man and luring in the monster with his violin. That smile on Karloff's face is so sweet. I really like the introduction here too. That the monster is so taken aback, he bursts into the house with his growl, expecting him to be afraid and not knowing what to do here. And this portion of the film is probably one of the most referenced. It's from the original novel. It's one of the few moments in these Frankenstein films taken directly from there. And it is, I think, how he learns to speak in the novel, although it's been some time since I've read it. But it's famously lampooned in Young Frankenstein. You have Gene Hackman making a cameo as the blind man with Peter Boyle's monster, and his blindness causes him to hurt the monster even more, and he rushes out of there. It's kind of funny. And O.P. Heggie really gives a decent performance here. What I really like about it is that it could be over the top in some ways. There's a lot of traps for it to be over the top. He's playing it out as sort of a biblical healer kind of figure. He looks very much like what you'd see in a biblical painting of one of the apostles, maybe. And instead, of it being over the top and really driving out really drawing out kind of the absurdity of it. It's sweet and genuine. It's really a very nuanced performance here. And this scene in particular, where he lays the monster down on the bed, kind of sort of skates that line too, in a way. You don't know what's going on quite here. The monster can't explain himself. He's mute, and the O.P. Heggie character leads the monster into a prayer, thanking him for bringing the two long-lost children together. The outcasts. And the music, it even goes further. It's sort of like I don't know what you call it, like almost that sounds like a church organ, sort of. poor Karloff is so afraid of the fire, all he can do is scowl at it. Yeah, here it is. Here's a scene I was going to reference here. You see the crucifix in his house directly behind Karloff. And the way Opiegi's body language, it looks very much like a religious painting. He's staring out towards heaven, and it might be because the character's blind, but it definitely is part of that religious imagery. And this scene really, you don't know if it's genuine or if it's Whale trying to be funny. It's a touching scene, and it just kind of shows. It's a nice contrast to the blaspheming Pretorius later on. It's just, it's a wonderful sequence. It's really, really, I don't know, if it's humorous on the blackest sort. And the crucifix actually lights up at the end of the scene. Here we have the first instance of the monster talking. And, Karloff was adamantly against the decision. And I guess he really tried to fight it. He tried to fight it and said, that it would take away from the character and it would hurt his performance. One of the reasons why the original Frankenstein was so iconic to make him, he had that sunken cheek effect, which, kind of made him look more like a cadaver. He took out his bridge work, and it made him look deader and thinner and more frail. But in this one, in order to do the dialogue, he had to have that in there, and so that's why his face looks a little fuller. But it was really a wise decision, and you see Boris Karloff was a smart man, but he was really wrong at this aspect of the character. He's very much able to deliver more insight into the monster's character with the dialogue. And they do a really nice job writing the dialogue for the monster. I guess, they looked at the kind of dialogue and comprehension a really small child would have. And so you see, kind of, he still has some trouble communicating, because he can't really form full sentences or thoughts. But when he's right on, when he really relays the point across, even though it's simple and very childlike, it's very honest and very sincere. And, at the most powerful moments of the film, when Karloff, delivers the most iconic lines, they're just so heartbreaking and so touching. They just really showcase what a brilliant actor he was, and what a brilliantly written film this was. Here we have John Carradine making his first appearance in a horror film. I've probably talked about John Carradine more than I ever could have wanted to. He's just makes an appearance in this film. I guess if you'd listen to him, you'd led to believe that he was offered the role as the monster back in the 30s and the role of Dracula too. But it's kind of fun seeing him here. Throw the fire on the poor monster. See here, this is a moment I was sort of talking about with that spare style. That sparse amount of words that the monster knows was really powerful. You see him say, friend, sort of outstretched arms. It's just like the really kind of a picture of loneliness. Here's one thing I really, really like about this film is that it's I know I brought this up before, about my displeasure over the lack of continuity between some of these films. But I will say this about Bride of Frankenstein. Aside from, some of the cast replacements of different characters, this feels like it's in the same universe as the original Frankenstein film. And it's the only really glaring omission is that there's no explanation of what happened to Frederick Kerr, that he's just dead. That he just, like, Pretorius has a line like, oh, it's barren now, I presume, like as if he died and was buried in between the episodes of the film. But aside from that, this film really does a nice job with feeling like it's in the same universe. And that's really due to the fact that there's some of the sets and locales are shot the same way, and they're reconstructed, and they look like they did. I believe that cemetery, I could, compare it to the original Frankenstein. It looks like the exact same cemetery. And you see the lab at the end, and the watchtower is pretty much exactly the same. And, it's just me being a stickler, but I appreciate it. I really do. Here we have Dwight Fry again. Back from the grave. He always comes back, and he's always a treat. I love Dwight Fry. In this film, he was actually supposed to be given a little bit of a juicier role, I've heard. He plays Carl, the assistant to Dr. Pretorius. He's not hunchbacked, and he's got a little bit of a different makeup, and he's sort of squirrely and scoundrelly, but he's good in the film. He was supposed to have been given his own subplot where he goes around, because these are murderers that presumably Pretorius is blackmailing into helping with the experiments. Presumably the plot was that this Carl character was going around murdering people, in the hysteria of the monster, and then blaming it on the monster, sort of taking advantage of the situation and, just being depraved. And I don't know. I'm glad it's kind of cut from the film. I don't know, presumably it was cut because it was too terrible, but I would say it probably was cut because it sounds like it really would have dragged down the narrative of the thing and, just the momentum of the film, because this film was pretty tight, It doesn't feel like it drags at any moments of the film, and, that's That's something you could say, because some of the Universal films have a leisurely pace to build things up, but this feels very fast and um, very consistent. One of the things about Pretorius, another thing about him is that he's very much giving in to vice. And, the constant line is, oh, have a cigar, it's my only weakness. He's all about, giving in to vices. And that's, it goes with the sort of theme about morality of the film and about religion, that you have a character that is so interested in being a sinner because it gives him more fulfillment. It's really a subversive idea from the time, and of course he is humorous, and it's always with contempt. One of the things I've heard is that his name was Septimus Pretorius. I guess I don't believe he's referred to that in the film. I think it was one of the scripts or novels, but I've heard that roughly translates into something called Seven Sins, a reference to that. And if that's true, then if that was Whale's intent, then that's a lot of fun too. I love dead, hate living. You're wise in your generation. That's like the best comeback to the line ever. Here's one of the things I also like about Pretorius is that there's something to be said that he is the one, one of the few people aside from the blind man in the film who has no fear of the monster. And I don't believe it's because the monster, I don't believe it's because he sees the monster, past the exterior and, seeing the soul that has good intentions like the blind man does. I think it's because he is very much loves the macabre, like how perverse the monster is, like that sort of gives him a fulfillment. And I think, it really is an interesting comparison point between the monster and, the monster's two mentors, you could say. Pretorius is on the one side, brings out the evil in the monster, and then the other man really legitimately wanted to be his friend. It just sort of makes the monster's path over the film all the more tragic. Here we have a great moment that really harkens back to the original film. You see that the monster has finally become the master in the scenario between the creator and the creation. You see him enter Frankenstein, how powerless he feels that the monster can speak. And, ironically, the first thing he does when he enters there is say, "Sit down," which is the, which Of course, you remember from the original Frankenstein was the first command that Frankenstein gave to his creation. It's a great scene. Karloff is very powerful in it. And, one of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is the score by Franz Waxman. It's a really iconic score. There's a lot of great motifs to it. Obviously there's the theme of about the bride has, where it's sort of, they kind of play a fox kind of wedding bell kind of march. It's meant to, meant to sort of be campy and fun. But I really like that little piece of music there, where they sort of, showcased the monster's threatening nature. Here we have kind of a revisit to probably one of the more famous scenes in the original, where the monster comes back for Elizabeth to attack her. Like the scene where she's in the wedding room. What we have here that I haven't mentioned quite yet is that Elizabeth is not played by Meg Clark again. She's played by Valerie Hobson, who was 17 years old at the time. I don't know why they didn't bring back Meg Clark. I think one of the things, you can't quote me as being an expert or knowing exactly what's going on, but I think part of the reason why is that Valerie Hobson, I think, is sort of similar looking to Elsa Lanchester, and sort of the dichotomy of the creature and creator, how similar they are, and then you have his bride looking like the Frankenstein's bride. I think that's part of the appeal, and also because she's, I think, younger. I would say she's a little bit more vulnerable than Meg Clark was. Meg Clark was very strong, even in the scene where he gets frightened where she gets frightened by the monster. So I think you're a little more fearful for Valerie Hobson. I don't know, it could be something that even as simple as a contract, her not being under contract to Universal at the time. Who knows? But she's also in another horror film from this time, sort of the underloved and underseen Werewolf of London. Here we have a scene that's recreated from the original. It goes through the walls, and you see them walk up the same set of stairs going into the laboratory from the first picture. Really wonderful set design, that laboratory and those stairs. It reminds you a lot of sort of German expressionism, kind of the most blatant thing. Burnt at the stake as wizards for this experiment. You almost think that's part of the great appeal of everything. Here's the scenes I sort of was talking about earlier with Colin Clive, looking how frail he looks. He's in another horror film that came out this year called Mad Love with Peter Lorre. He comes off a little better in that picture, but it's sad to see him like this, especially reading about everything that happened to him and his depression. It's really, really a shame. Here we have one of the subplots of the film, which I think which I think they could have done if it was a little braver and if they wanted a more tragic end for Henry, is that pieces of Elizabeth, like this heart, might have gone to the bride. And I believe they might have been playing with that idea. And which would explain why, at the end, the bride goes to Henry. There are always accidental accidents. There are always accidental deaths. Always. Here he's Carl, even though he's not Fritz, he's still talking to himself as he walks down those stairs. Was a very fresh one. Yeah, you see how ugly they look. It's pretty good makeup on little Dwight Fry there. He does, I think, what he does a good job, just sort of looking horrible. You don't mind him like you don't mind Lionel Atwill doing the same sort of roles over and over again. Yeah, I don't know. I might say it's my favorite Dwight Fry role, this one, because he does get some humor there, but you can't really say it's better than his part as Renfield. Here's what I was talking about with the monster. If you notice, his hair is growing. This is comical here. Like, all he has to do is like wave the glass in front of him like a dog, and he puts in. He's got a little goofy smile on his face. It just kind of shows how the monster is very childlike and he wants a drink. Doesn't even look or understand that he's putting in a sort of a sleeping potion in there. He's grunting as he goes down, and he puts a blanket over his face. That'll shut you up. Here, that's what I was talking about. Elizabeth, she's dead. If the film had taken that, I think you would have had to have killed off Henry as well. And it just, I think, would have been too depressing and would have ruined Whale's intent. To have this film be sort of a dark comedy as well as a horror film. You need someone to root for in this. It's not the monster, because he's still sort of in the middle. You could be sympathetic to him, but he's not natural. He's still a figure of terror. And so you need Henry, I think, to be sympathetic. And, to be fair, he really has learned his lesson from the original film. And, the ones who are doing wrong here are Pretorius, who wants to take the experiment, obviously breed his own race of people to darker and more unnatural places. And so you really do need Henry in the film. You really need to feel sorry for him and get him out of this. Get him out of here. A little more gruesome, too, like the connotations and sort of the hints there of the operational scene. You see Pretorius grab hold of the heart with those tongs. That's always a good little trick about these first two Frankenstein films, or good scenes, is that they do a good job of sort of implying horrific violence, or not horrific violence, but implying the horrific nature of the monster's creation. It reminds me of the sequence in the original Frankenstein where Dr. Waldman is going to begin the dissection of the monster. It's really a fun sequence, or not fun, but shocking sequence. And obviously, we think about what it meant to people at the time. Here we have the laboratory equipment from Strickfaden, who designed these pieces for the original film. In this one, they it's even more. You see those elaborate kites there, and they really go into more detail. Like, the production design on this film is so outstanding. Look at those huge bulbs. They really showcase sort of the size of everything. This film actually, you listen to the lightning crackle there. This film actually, I think, is the only Universal film. Well, that's not true. There was another one, Universal horror film, to actually get some recognition from the Academy Awards. I believe it was nominated for some of the technical categories at the 1936 Academy Awards for sound. And, it's from Strickfaden that the impressive sounds come from. Those zapping, kind of the Tesla coils there. It's never quite like the lab equipment. The lab scenes are never quite as impressive as they are in this film here. I always like how they sort of light the creation sequences of both these films. Colin Clive has really bold, I would say bold-looking eyes, you know what I mean, that they highlight really well. Sort of see the sparks going off, and there's shadows there, and, how the lights flicker on and off. They're really wonderful sequences. I read that in the early 90s, all this lab equipment, it had been in storage while Strickfaden was alive, and it actually went on sale for auction. And I guess it still worked, in that a lot of these sound effects that were generated by this lab equipment were used in a lot of later films. Obviously, the big one you can hear is that they sort of sound like the lightsabers from the Star Wars films, and it's just sort of fun. And seeing that even as films, the technology improved, that these contraptions are still being used to make all these great sound effects. Of course, this lab equipment was, all of it was brought out of storage in the early 70s to be in Young Frankenstein, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary. It's a great film. You should see it. But it's just, fun that I guess Strickfaden was actually still alive, and he rented the equipment from him. And it really added a layer of authenticity to that film, and as a homage. There's a scene that could have actually needed that whole subplot with Carl there, because Karloff's monster wakes up and just out of nowhere he rushes and kills Carl. You know, you presumably from here you think it's because he's impatient for the bride to come back to life. But the bride to come to life, she hasn't been back. But you know, it really it seems sort of jarring, and that, you know, the monster isn't sympathetic if he just kills someone in cold blood like that, even if it is a cold-blooded murderer that he kills. Here's the introduction of the bride. She's alive. Alive. Karloff, Elsa Lanchester was the wife of Charles Lawton, and she appeared in quite a few films with him. She was nominated, actually, for a few Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actress. But it's just so telling that this is the film that she'll forever be remembered for, because she's really so iconic in it. Just this image, this makeup that Jack Pierce created for her. And the way she moves around, it's so shocking and so, it's just so perverse and kind of comical at the same time. Apparently, she based her inspiration for the character off of animals, swans, you know, those large, swans you see at the park. I guess she went to the park and sort of saw them, and you know, that jerking neck that moves back and forth, and so how she snarls, that iconic snarl. It's really really inspired method of performance. You know, I've taken acting courses where, you know, they advise you to find an animal that really inspires you and follow the physicality of them. You know, I mentioned earlier that I really think Lugosi sort of does this with the original Dracula. It's almost feline the way he carries himself. Here's another aspect that they might have played with that idea, is that the monster, or that the monster still has traces of Elizabeth in her if they went with that initial idea, because she's attracted to Henry and finds the monster repulsive. Here's sort of the scene that sort of implies sort of the sexual undertones of the story that they intended for them to breed. You see that great look that Pretorius and Henry give each other. Here's the aspect of the character that I've sort of brought up before, I believe in my Son of Frankenstein commentary, is that the story has an ending and a character arc. And, you know, I'm always of the belief that you shouldn't do a sequel unless there's more to do. And then you have the monster here come to the powerful realization that his life has been a farce and that there's nothing for him to live for. And, you know, it's so tragic, but what I say before, it just really hits it home with Karloff's, you know, perfect delivery of those simple, childlike, simple lines that are so piercing and to the point. And Pretorius, you know, is just evil. And even though the monster isn't evil, he's touched by unnatural, evil things, and so he belongs dead. you almost wish that this were the end of it, that he didn't come back for more, because that's really a powerful end to the character. And, Henry doesn't get his comeuppance that he, some would argue, should have. But, it's sort of happy to see him get out of it. I can't condemn Colin Clive and James Whale's interpretation of Henry too much of a. I'm too much of a romantic to do it. The idea that he has such an imagination and a belief. So you're glad to see him have a happy ending with his bride, even though it might have been interesting had the film gone darker. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary. It will be, if you're listening to it on the day it's uploaded, it will be Halloween, which is the perfect time to enjoy a look at monsters. And in a way, this is very much a final piece of the project that I started. I made it through all the Universal Frankenstein pictures, which, if you're like me, you think they're it's the finest horror series around. And ending it on Bride of Frankenstein was a very appropriate choice, I believe, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time, hopefully. I don't know what will happen next. Or even if there will be any more, to tell you the truth. We'll see. I hope. I would just have to look at what there is to do, and if I do come back, it will not be solely horror films. I think I've really said my piece about the classic horror films. And, if you guys listen to this and say, hey, Mike, do this so-and-so film, I'll take a look at it. But, we'll see. We'll see what comes next. If you have any recommendations, definitely put it in the comments below. And, like I said in the first commentary, I hope that you guys have opinions about the film and that you want to share them. I'm always open to hear it, and I hope I've had listeners who have enjoyed my look at the Frankenstein series. And, if you're listening to it on Halloween, the first day, have a happy Halloween. Bride of Frankenstein is the perfect way to celebrate Halloween. Have a good one and enjoy.